All right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Welcome to the Classification Community Webinar. We hold these every about 4 to 6 weeks, and the goal of this is to connect people, to share experiences, and to learn from one another. We really want to bring the community together to try to help everyone share their experiences between the classification worlds that they're living in, whether it be ERP, PLMs, e-commerce, PIMs, whatever it is. There's always a great need for understanding your classification model. We have a great session that we have planned for today. We're very excited about it. Reminder though, there will be a video that comes out after we do this performance, so hang tight. You'll be able to get a copy of this video as well. But we're very excited to have you here live. Feel free to share the video afterwards with others if they want to go ahead and get more information. Just to remind you about the format a little bit, our goal is to have the first 15 minutes of presentation. Presenter will go through and give us some insight and some food for thought. And the goal is the next 15 minutes really will be about the group here asking questions of each other, the person who's giving the presentation or any of us, and really just kind of forming some good collaboration together. This is a webinar session, so you do have to raise your hand for me to go ahead and open the microphones to talk, or if you prefer, you can type in a short answer and question, and you can have that in the box, and I'll be happy to read it for you as well. So feel free to do what is most comfortable for you. A quick introduction: we are Convergence Data, and we do help companies with software and services to help classify part data. And we have myself, my name is Allison Luna, and I am the Director of Operations here at Convergence Data and work with teams to classify data for different companies. I do have Richard Turner, who runs the company here, and he has been doing this for 15 years. Richard, did you want to say hello?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining.
And our special guest speaker today, Catherine Trad, she is actually a program manager at Solar Turbines, and she's been working with classification for over 2 years, and Solar Turbines has actually been doing it for closer to 10 years and working with classification. So with that, Catherine, I will send it over to you.
Hi, thank you so much. It's a real privilege to be here. I really appreciate being invited. So I don't know about you, but I love libraries. And I mean the book and paper variety. And I think I love it because there's such an elegant organization solution to all of the data that's stored there. And you can walk in and you see this sort of lovely, just physical organization of books on shelves, but sort of within a couple of minutes whether the information you're looking for is there or whether it's available elsewhere or not available at all. And that's a really powerful thing. And when I think of my parts database at Solar Turbines, I think of that very much as a technical library. And I don't know if it's because it's invisible, because it's made of data and ones and zeros, but for whatever reason, it seems like it's okay that our databases have a lot of chaos and disarray in them. So when I first started getting involved with classification, it really gave me a lot of peace of mind, because our classification and attribute strategy, our part metadata strategy, is what allows our technical library to be searchable, and I think that's very powerful in any organization. So I really like this slide because this thought exercise is something that's really exciting. So for all of those around the webinar and around the world, my question to you is, what is this? And someone from England might call this a torch. Someone from the US might call this a flashlight, or a hand light, or an LED light. And that's awesome, because around an organization, people from diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences are going to come at information from different angles, and that's amazing. You want that diversity of thought and diversity of exposure. But what's really powerful is when your metadata is really strong, everyone can leave with the same conclusion, that the organization has decided that this is called a flashlight, and that so even though they started at hand light or torch, they come away with flashlight, and that creates a consistency that's very powerful all the way from the design process through service for the customer. So a little bit about what we're going to cover in the next couple slides. The importance of naming. I think we already started talking about that. keeping metadata in perspective and why now, and some takeaways that strong part metadata is really foundational for searchability, database quality, any analytics opportunities, and of course cost savings. So just a little bit about me. I do have a confession to make. When I started as a manufacturing engineer at Solar Turbines, I was a terrible part author. I was a triple threat. I was new to Solar's technology. I was new to our PLM system, which at Solar is Windchill. And I was really new to the idea that when I created a part record, I was also creating metadata along with it. So now that I'm responsible for all that metadata, I have a much deeper appreciation for it and a much deeper appreciation for what we can do to help engineers and part authors in general understand that the metadata they create in relationship to their records is really a part of their legacy in the technical work of a company. So let's talk about metadata and what that means. For me, it's 3 pillars: classification, the attributes of those classifications, and a standardized naming convention based on the classification and attributes selected. So let's take an example outside of the technical world for a second. Let's say you want to adopt a pet and you go to a shelter. If you walked up and just asked for any pet, they could bring you anything back. And I don't know about you, but if I came home with a snake or a reptile of any kind, I would not make it back in the house. No offense to anyone who loves reptiles. But what you do want to do is you want to be more specific. So you probably want to say, hey, I'm interested in adopting a dog. But is that really enough information? So I would argue that it's not. There are attributes about these different types of dogs. So we have classification dog and then some attributes describing them that can really help us dial down to what we're really looking for. So if we look at the husky, the medium size, blue eye color, black and white coat, and has a primary breed of husky. But when it really comes down to it, we want a standardized way of asking for what we're looking for. So let's say that we're going to name these dogs with different attributes by the classification we choose, the primary breed, and the color. So what we really are looking for is a dog with a primary breed Labrador whose color is chocolate, and all of a sudden the shelter can tell us immediately whether they do or don't have a dog that matches that description. So we can evaluate and then decide whether that pup's coming home. So this is such an important thing, and believe it or not, it's kind of embarrassing to admit it, but it took me about 3 months to just create this slide so that I myself could kind of conceptualize and communicate to my own management how important these individual pillars are to how our metadata is produced and then also how we consume it as an organization. So a little bit about Solar Turbines. So Solar Turbines is a San Diego-based company. We design and service turbo machinery products and driven equipment like compressors. We serve power generation customers and oil and gas customers, and we make some really cool stuff. And some things about it that make part metadata particularly relevant is that these are high investment products that have a very long life cycle. So some of our products in the field have been out there for 30, 40, 50 years and are still going strong. So not only do they live a very long time, but they also have a high service life cycle. So just kind of like an automobile, certain things have to be serviced on turbo machinery frequently. So what really matters to us in terms of our part data records is being able to understand the configuration that was sold and is operating in the field, and then how we can manage with metadata to be able to service that equipment to our utmost ability with the customer. So let's talk about a little bit more about metadata and putting it in perspective. So I love this cartoon because you can look at it 2 ways. One, every person around this elephant is seeing it differently. So the person at the front is thinking that the elephant is a spear, while the person at the back is thinking it's a rope. Well, this is just like our flashlight example. From the front, it might look like a locomotive. From the back, it might just look like a piece of, the back end of a piece of steel. But when you look at the whole thing and try to understand what an object is, you need to describe it holistically. Additionally, you can look at metadata from a lot of perspectives too. So these people around the elephant can represent different parts of an organization. They're going to come at it with a different perspective, and they're going to want to take something away from it from a different perspective. So what are those parts of your organization? So typically it's engineering, analytics, marketing, service and aftermarket absolutely care about metadata, logistics, supply chain, of course, accounting and finance, but ultimately the customer is who really benefits from strong metadata in your part database. So let's break down some of the benefits of having great metadata. So for engineering, which is where Solar Turbines started with our classification and metadata journey, number one, the benefit is standardized naming. So I don't know about you, but when I write a grocery list, I might write down that I want, I might want butter, chips, and bread, and someone else might write that list completely differently. They might abbreviate butter, they might call chips Lay's, they might call bread sandwich bread or something like that. So being able to standardize naming was the number one benefit of us moving into this classification and attribute space. But that brought a lot of other benefits right along with it, which was maximizing part reuse and minimizing duplicates. One of the most frustrating things in engineering is putting time and effort into designing something just to figure out that we already have it or already make it. That, when we do those things of minimizing our duplication, optimizes our maintenance of our parts and drawings. It minimizes duplicated effort within the organization, and also it allows us to find similar parts, which is a really interesting thing as designs sort of evolve, or where you can standardize different designs across products. So let's talk about logistics. So logistics has a lot of benefit to gain from standardized naming. Reducing delays and fees absolutely impacts the bottom line. Certification and compliance just gets harder and harder as time marches on, and having this consistent naming, this consistent metadata language governing what these items are is extremely valuable. And also the ease of language translation. So Solar is a global company, and we ship internationally all over the world, and being able to consistently translate the same part name or part description over and over again is very beneficial and reduces that maintenance. Supply chain gets a lot of benefit too. So a bunch of engineering ones apply here, but also being able to do analysis by classification or by attribute value. So if we wanted to think of the dog example, we could analyze all the dogs that are at the shelter, or we could analyze all the dogs with an attribute of primary breed Labrador. And we could look at that data and we can look for trends or look for relevant details and make business decisions based on that. Also, I hear about inventory levels all the time and how important it is to keep our inventory costs in check, and being able to optimize those by reducing duplication, by making sure you understand some of those high-level data relationships is very powerful for supply chain organization. Marketing too. Marketing absolutely cares. Being able to communicate clearly internally and externally is key. And if we don't have consistent ways of naming things, it just makes it that much harder. So being able to also optimize for search engine results is huge for marketing. So service and aftermarket, poor aftermarket. One of the things I've learned deeply over the past 2 years of classification is that the folks that need to use it the most have sort of the least control over when the record is created. And the aftermarket group is on the hook in front of the customer, trying to make sure they find the right part for replacing things. And if they can't search our database effectively and find that, that's just putting them in a position to not be successful. So the better we do at creating metadata that is relevant and deep enough, but not too deep, is extremely important for our customer satisfaction and our service and aftermarket organization. But their whole key in life is reducing unplanned downtime and then supporting customer need as demanded. Accounting and finance utilizes metadata for optimizing pricing strategies, looking at inventory levels. It grows and grows. So a lot of companies are getting into the Internet of Things and utilizing analytics. Being able to innovate to optimize all kinds of different analytics opportunities, and also work for efficiencies. With this data there, I mean, there are going to be questions you want to answer a year from now that no one has ever thought of before. And if that metadata is rich, you will have a foundation to start those investigations. And ultimately, it's the customer that benefits from great metadata, and they're looking for the best product at the best price. And it's super unfortunate. I mean, I'm never going to expect a customer to come in and clap anyone on the back at Solar and say, hey, your metadata is the best I've ever seen. But what you do see is that that we can respond quickly and effectively. We can keep our pricing in line. We can be very efficient in our engineering design process and hours. We can come to market faster. And all of that is sort of foundationally revolving around making our database as strong and as efficient and as robust as possible. And the metadata is an enormous part of that. So I hope I have convinced you that there is widespread benefit to an organization and the customer base, and that metadata matters. So a little bit about Solar's journey as I kind of wrap up my 15 minutes here. We've been at this for about 10 years, and we really struggled at the beginning. But when we had line of sight to a PLM, a Product Lifecycle Management System of Windchill 9.1, that was the first opportunity we had to use a system called PartsLink, which is a classification and attribute system built into the software. And it's the first time we were able to deploy a customization that would name parts automatically based on how they were classified and attributed. So as time has marched on, that team designed our initial foundational schema for our classification and attribute structure and identified the critical data set in our parts database that needed to be classified immediately. And that classification effort has grown and grown. We evolved to, we moved to Windchill 10.1, which got us some more functionality. And then since then, our schema has evolved and matured to the point where we're actually able to classify configurable objects and functions. And now we're even moving to the sort of next level of Windchill and Windchill 11, and that's going to give us a lot of database quality opportunities that we didn't have in the previous tools. So why now? You know, this is a hard thing. This is a hard thing for every company, and I don't think you'd be on the webinar if it was easy for you or easy for your organization. But I don't, and this is not meant to be a sales pitch, but I know with Windchill 11, the automatic naming occurs. You can set up the rules, you can name with the classification and the attributes out of the box, which is not something that's ever been offered before. And Windchill 11 also has the capability of bulk updating your database, which is also something that will be very important for database quality as you move forward and as your database matures. So I hope we've covered the importance of naming, that keeping metadata in perspective is powerful, and that there are tools out there now that make it worthwhile to revisit the business case for using classification if that's important to you. And that searchability, database quality, analytics opportunities, and cost savings are all stemming from great metadata, and that it matters. It matters to your whole organization, it matters to your customers. So it really just boils down to, are you ready?
Wonderful. Kat, I have a couple questions out here maybe you could help us with. I'm going to read one from David. He says, who creates and approves new categories and new parts with your company?
That is a great question, and there are lots of different strategies for doing this. So the way Solar manages it is we actually allow individual design engineers to create part objects. And we expect individual design engineers to utilize the classification structure that's provided unless they can't. And if they can't, they actually contact me, and I run an enterprise-wide governance team for our schema. So I take the proposed change, I work with them, and we dive into it and really try to understand why it's different than something that we already have in our schema. And if the change is needed, I take it to that governance team. As a governance team, we vet it and make sure that it doesn't conflict with the existing schema. And then if it's approved, essentially I go forward and make those administrative changes in the software, and then the design engineer moves forward with their content creation. Perfect.
Thank you. We do have another question from Melissa. She asks, what is the value of classifying configurable objects? So I guess assume versus assemblies. I'm not sure. Do you have any insight?
So think of it this way. So if you were to go if you were to go to a restaurant and look at the menu sort of above the counter, and you were going to order lunch, right? So lunch is a configurable object. It has essentially infinite possibilities depending on what you choose. When it's configured, though, your lunch is very specific. So if you order a cheeseburger and French fries, you no longer are talking about this sort of ambiguous configurable lunch order. It's now a cheeseburger and fries. And when we think about classification, we really want to describe the object in front of us. And if an item really is a cheeseburger, we want to call it a cheeseburger. And so by classifying a configurable object, we've put some code in place where we can identify something when it is ambiguous, when it is configurable, versus when it is configured.
Got it. Very good. I think that should answer that question. Now the next one is, what does the governance team do? So I think you said you have a governance team. What is their major tasks, I guess, or role in this process?
Yeah, this is also such a great question and such a big deal. Anyone who's starting on a classification journey, I encourage you from second one to be very, very strong with your management team that long-term governance is critical to this effort being successful. So the governance team has really two major roles. One is to represent their part of the business. So at Solar, we have engineering organizations all over the world that are focused on sort of different products, different services, and we want to make sure that that all of those perspectives are given the same amount of weight and the same sort of time on the floor in terms of understanding how we'll impact them when a change is made. But then, so they come and they represent and they give feedback on any proposed changes. And then secondarily, when a change is made or when we're going to make improvements to the system, they are a direct conduit to their parts of the organization to be a local subject matter expert and to be sort of that on-the-ground, grassroots support system for the business all over the world. So it's a two-way street. They bring issues, they take solutions back. It's awesome. It's a really cool dynamic.
So to follow up on that, I was just thinking for new parts then, that has to be a significant part of the governance process, right? So we have to make sure any new parts that are created or interjected must be held to the same standard of whatever you cleaned. So I guess the question that I would have is, how are the parts created today, and who does it to make sure that it stays within this governance process?
Well, every part's required to be classified. So we don't actually review each individual part that's created. We utilize the classification search capabilities because the metadata is there. If you try to create a part that has all of the same attributes, it's flagged. So you kind of get, during the part creation process, each user has this sort of built-in sort of safeguard that they really have to work hard to make a duplicate. So that's why we don't necessarily have to scrutinize every new design or every new part that's created. I don't need to see every different configuration of bracket that comes through. I just need to know that they've looked at the brackets that are classified and that hopefully they've determined that they can't use one that's already there.
Wonderful, thank you. Now just a reminder to everybody on the phone, if you would like to actually talk yourself, I'm happy to unmute you and you can ask a question live. I'm happy to do that, or if you'd like to continue to send them in through the question box, that's completely fine as well. I do have a question here around the standardization naming. How do you decide which name to standardize, right? Because you could have many, and there must be a methodology to say, I know one or another is the right one. Does it have a lot to do with where the data might be going after the PLM system, or how do you decide what is the normalized, this standardized naming?
So we essentially put, we have one name. So I and the governance team will define what we name each individual component, all of their sort of parent level assemblies, and then even the top level product names are standardized through the engineering organization. And then they can be simplified or diluted as they move downstream, but they all start from this sort of one source of information record. So I know, for instance, there's a group that creates our manuals that will actually either truncate or they'll adjust the names to make it more user-friendly in a manual reading setting, but we keep the sort of backbone of the name consistent throughout the organization.
Wonderful. I do have another question here. Classification data, is it used in other places outside of the PLM system?
Oh, yes. Yes, it's the whole reason to have it. And once you've done it, you've done the hard work. So imagine the different places the different parts of your organization that need to understand what something is. So your supply chain. How do you assign a new component to a buyer? You need to know what it is, right? How do you, when you're shipping things across international borders, there's a customs classification code. So by classifying things from an engineering perspective, you're giving probably your global trade management group an opportunity to map to what their appropriate classification code is. So 100% this type of metadata is extremely useful outside of the PLM system.
I would tend to agree, and there seems to be a pretty big resurgence or surge toward using this in the e-commerce world, right, in different marketing capacities, and I think this is potentially a great place for it once it's cleaned up.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you.
Okay, I think we have just one more here. How many parts are classified today? Are you done? How long did it take? I know that's 3 questions. That's kind of cheating, but.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the last one. You're never done. You're never, ever done. Because the more you learn and the more mature your classification structure becomes, the more you're going to go back and revisit the quality of your metadata database. So if, for instance, maybe I have been making brackets out of brass for 10 years, and then all of a sudden I decide I need stronger brackets. I'm going to make them out of brass and stainless steel. You're going to go back and you're going to have to update, anything that needs to be updated in your database, or maybe, I don't know. So you're always going to be updating your system, and your schema is always going to be growing and changing as long as your organization continues making new and innovating new things, or that parts of the organization need information that they didn't need before. So maybe your supply chain used to only care about what material something was made of, but now they also want to know the last manufacturing process that it goes through before being finished. And you never know. I mean, what they need today is very different from what they might need 10 years from now. So you're never done. For solar specifically, so we've been on this road for about 10 years, and we've been able to classify parts since 2009, 10-ish. We have about 1.5 million parts in our database as a whole. About 400,000 of them are classified, and we have roughly 2,000 terminal nodes, so the most specific level of classification. So if you think of it from biology class, it was kingdom, phylum, class, order, genus, species. It's kind of like getting down to the species level of the technical part classification tree. So we are absolutely not done. We classify every new part that's created, and we're constantly cleaning up data sets that are still used today that are not classified yet. So yeah, we're very much still on our journey.
All right. Hey, Kat, Richard Turner, thank you so much for that presentation. I don't think we have any more questions, but by the way, thanks for all those great questions by the group. That was wonderful, and thanks for your presentation. Very impressive in terms of what you've been able to get done the last 10 years and the work you've been doing for the last 2 years. 400,000 parts classified. That's in a large data model, 2,000 categories, is very impressive. So thanks for your presentation today. Is there any more questions, Allison?
No, I don't see any more questions. I think we're running out of time as well, and I'd like to be prompt on the, and respect everybody's time. But we thank you, everybody, for coming. Please look for the next email out that will identify when the next meeting is, approximately a month. I think we're talking about maybe the end of September. And if you have topics, please feel free to email them in to us, and we'll be happy to entertain topics. Or if you would like to be a presenter in the next one, we'd really love to hear from you on that. So please feel free to email either Richard or myself. And I think the email with the video will be from Richard, so you can communicate through that. But thank you again, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Yeah, thank you, Kat. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.